The question is, are you the player or the pawn? Right now, while you're consuming this content, someone with half your intelligence is making decisions that affect your future. Someone with less talent than you is controlling narratives that shape your reality. Someone with fewer qualifications than you is living the life you deserve, simply because they understand the invisible rules of psychological warfare. You've been programmed to believe that merit matters, that hard work gets rewarded, that good people finish first. These are beautiful lies designed to keep you predictable, manageable, and ultimately powerless. The brutal reality is this: while you've been playing by the rules they taught you in school, others have been studying the rules they don't teach anywhere. The hidden psychology of influence, control, and invisible dominance. 5 centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli cracked the code of human power dynamics. He discovered why brilliant people remain overlooked while mediocre strategists rise to the top. He understood why genuine leaders get betrayed while manipulative sociopaths build empires. Today, I'm going to reveal 8 psychological principles that separate those who get used from those who do the using. These aren't motivational platitudes or feel-good advice. These are the dark mechanics of human psychology that determine who controls whom. But understand this clearly: once you see how the game really works, you can never pretend to be innocent again. Once you understand these principles, you'll never be able to blame others for your lack of influence. Let me tell you about the moment I stopped being psychology's victim. I used to be that person who believed talent would be recognized. I thought integrity would be rewarded. I assumed that being genuine would naturally attract genuine people. I watched as confident manipulators received promotions I deserved. I saw charismatic liars build massive followings while honest experts remained ignored. I witnessed calculated sociopaths create thriving relationships while authentic people died lonely. And then I discovered the truth that destroyed my worldview but saved my future. Reality doesn't reward authenticity. It rewards psychological mastery. It doesn't respect good intentions. It respects strategic thinking. It doesn't care about your character. It cares about your ability to influence human behavior. This revelation shattered my naive beliefs, but it also liberated me from a lifetime of frustration and powerlessness. Machiavelli lived during the most politically volatile period in Italian history. He watched as kingdoms collapsed overnight, alliances shifted without warning, and brilliant leaders were destroyed by those who understood psychology better than politics. His insights aren't academic theories. They're survival manuals for anyone who refuses to remain psychologically powerless. Understanding psychological dominance doesn't mean becoming evil. It means becoming sophisticated enough to recognize when others are using these principles against you, and strong enough to respond with equal psychological force. What I need you to do right now: comment these exact words. I choose psychological sovereignty over naive victimhood. This isn't just engagement. It's your declaration of war against your own powerlessness. Because everything I'm about to reveal requires one fundamental transformation, from unconscious victim to conscious player. Are you ready to become psychologically untouchable? Let's begin. Number 1. Victimhood is voluntary psychology. Your powerlessness is a choice you're making unconsciously every day. Every time you react emotionally to someone's behavior, you're giving them control over your internal state. Every time you take someone's disrespect personally, you're validating their power over your psychology. Every time you wait for others to change before you feel better, you're volunteering to remain their psychological prisoner. You've been conditioned to believe that feeling hurt by others' actions makes you sensitive and empathetic. In reality, it makes you controllable and exploitable. Consider your own patterns. How often do you feel frustrated by people who should behave differently? How often do you feel disappointed by those who should appreciate you more? How often do you feel angry at situations that shouldn't be happening? Every one of these emotional reactions is you choosing to give your power away to external circumstances you cannot control. Machiavelli observed, "Men willingly believe what they wish to believe. Most people wish to believe that others will treat them fairly if they're good enough, that their value will be recognized if they work hard enough, that respect will come naturally if they deserve it enough. These beliefs feel comforting, but they create psychological dependency. You're essentially saying, my emotional state depends on other people choosing to behave the way I want them to." This is the foundation of powerlessness. Psychologically sovereign people operate from a different framework. They understand that other people's behavior reveals information about those people. Nothing more, nothing less. When someone disrespects them, they don't take it personally. They gather information about that person's character and adjust their strategy accordingly. When someone betrays their trust, they don't feel devastated. They recognize they miscalculated someone's psychology and update their assessment. When someone tries to manipulate them, they don't feel offended. They appreciate the clarity about what kind of person they're dealing with. This shift from victim psychology to strategic psychology is transformative. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you start asking, "What does this reveal about the other person, and how should I respond strategically?" Instead of trying to change others, you change how you position yourself relative to others. Instead of seeking validation from external sources, you become the source of your own psychological security. The moment you stop making other people responsible for your emotional state is the moment you become psychologically dangerous, because now you can observe, calculate, and respond from a position of strength rather than reacting from a position of emotional vulnerability. Stop volunteering for victimhood. Start choosing psychological sovereignty. Number 2, emotional reactions are psychological slavery. This principle will revolutionize your understanding of personal power. Your emotional reactions are the remote control others use to manipulate your behavior. Every time you lose your composure, explode in anger, or break down from stress, you're broadcasting to everyone around you exactly how to control your future actions. You're teaching them which buttons to push when they want to distract you, destabilize you, or diminish your influence. Emotionally reactive people are psychological slaves. They can be predicted, controlled, and defeated by anyone who understands their emotional triggers. Think about the last time someone made you really angry. What did you do? Did you yell? Did you defend yourself? Did you try to prove they were wrong? Did you seek validation from others about how unfairly you were treated? All of these responses have one thing in common. They put the other person in control of your behavior. They got to choose your emotional state, and you simply reacted according to their programming. This is exactly what psychologically dominant people want. They want you to be predictable. They want your buttons to be easily pushable. They want your energy to be redirectable toward emotional drama instead of strategic action. Machiavelli understood this completely. Hatred is acquired just as much by good actions as by bad ones. Therefore, he who wishes to maintain the state is often forced not to be good. People don't hate you because you're bad. They attack you because you're threatening their position. And they've learned that emotional attacks work to destabilize you. The solution isn't to become emotionless. The solution is to become emotionally disciplined. Psychologically powerful people feel emotions fully, but they never let emotions control their responses. They use emotions as information while maintaining strategic thinking as their decision-making framework. How emotional discipline creates psychological authority. When someone insults you, instead of defending yourself, you observe, "This person is either trying to manipulate me or they're revealing their own insecurity. Either way, this information helps me understand how to deal with them." When someone tries to make you angry, instead of getting angry, you think, "They're using anger as a distraction tactic. What are they trying to distract me from?" When someone attempts to guilt trip you, instead of feeling guilty, you recognize, "They're trying to use my empathy against me. This tells me they have no logical argument for what they want." This emotional discipline becomes terrifying to manipulative people because their primary weapons don't work on you. They can't distract you with drama, control you with anger, or manipulate you with guilt. And here's the most powerful part. When you stop being emotionally reactive, you start becoming emotionally influential. People begin seeking your approval because you're not desperately seeking theirs. They start valuing your opinion because you're not constantly trying to convince them of things. Your emotional sovereignty becomes magnetic because most people are drowning in emotional chaos and naturally gravitate toward those who have achieved emotional mastery. Master your emotional responses. Let others be slaves to their feelings while you become the master of your psychological state. Number 3, scarcity creates psychological hunger. This truth will transform how you approach all relationships. Abundance destroys value, while scarcity creates obsession. The biggest mistake good people make is being too available, too helpful, too accommodating. They think this makes them valuable. In reality, it makes them forgettable. Human psychology works on scarcity principles. What's easily available gets taken for granted. What's rare becomes precious. What's unlimited gets devalued. What's limited gets obsessed over. You've probably experienced this yourself. Think about someone who always texts you back immediately versus someone who takes time to respond. Which person's messages do you anticipate more? Which person seems more important and busy? Think about friends who are always available versus friends who have full, interesting lives. Which friends do you respect more? Which friends do you try harder to impress? The psychological principle is brutal but consistent. People value what they cannot easily access and dismiss what they can always obtain. Machiavelli observed, "Men desire what they cannot have and despise what they possess in abundance." This applies to every form of human interaction. Your time, attention, approval, help, and presence only have psychological value when they're perceived as scarce resources. When you're always available, people stop appreciating your availability. When you always say yes, people stop valuing your agreement. When you always help, people start expecting your help as their right, rather than appreciating it as your gift. But when you become selectively available, psychologically interesting things happen. People start competing for your attention. They begin appreciating your time because they can't take it for granted. They value your help because they know it's not guaranteed. This isn't about playing games or being fake. This is about understanding that your perceived value is directly related to your perceived availability. How strategic scarcity works in practice. Instead of always being the first to reach out, you let others initiate contact sometimes and observe who actually makes the effort. Instead of saying yes to every social invitation, you become selective about which events deserve your presence. Instead of immediately helping everyone who asks, You evaluate whether helping them serves your interests and whether they appreciate your previous help. Instead of always being the one who gives in during conflicts, you occasionally hold your position and let others do the compromising. The psychological impact is immediate and powerful. People start treating you differently when they realize your resources aren't unlimited and your approval isn't automatic. The most sophisticated application of this principle is controlled withdrawal. When people start taking you for granted, you don't argue or complain. You simply become less available until they remember your value. Create scarcity around your most valuable resources. Make people earn access to your time, attention, and energy rather than giving these away freely. Number 4. Information asymmetry is psychological warfare. This is the most sophisticated form of influence, knowing more about others than they know about you. In every interaction, there's an information battle happening beneath the surface. The person with better information about the other person's psychology, motivations, fears, and desires has a massive advantage in determining the outcome of that interaction. Most people approach relationships with complete transparency. They share their feelings, reveal their insecurities, disclose their plans, and explain their motivations. They think this creates intimacy and trust. What it actually creates is vulnerability and manipulation opportunities for anyone sophisticated enough to exploit emotional openness. Meanwhile, psychologically sophisticated people operate as information vampires. They ask questions that seem caring, but gather strategic intelligence. They listen carefully for emotional triggers, personal fears, social insecurities, and hidden motivations. They reveal very little about their own psychology while learning everything about others' weaknesses. Machiavelli understood this dynamic. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. In modern terms, you can assess someone's psychological sophistication by observing how much they reveal about themselves versus how much they learn about others. Naive people are open books. Dangerous people are locked vaults that gradually learn everyone else's combination. How information asymmetry creates psychological advantage. When you know someone's deepest fears, you can avoid triggering them when you want cooperation or deliberately trigger them when you want control. When you understand someone's hidden motivations, you can position your requests in ways that align with what they secretly want. When you recognize someone's social insecurities, you can either validate them to build loyalty or exploit them to maintain dominance. When you discover someone's emotional triggers, you can choose to be the person who never pushes those buttons or the person who knows exactly where those buttons are. Let me give you a practical example. You're in a negotiation with someone. The naive approach is to be completely honest about what you want, why you want it, and what you're willing to give up to get it. The information asymmetric approach is different. You ask questions that reveal what they really need, what they're afraid of losing, what would make them feel successful. You share minimal information about your own position while gathering maximum intelligence about theirs. By the time the negotiation is complete, you understand their psychology so thoroughly that you can frame any outcome in a way that makes them feel like they won, even when you got everything you actually wanted. This principle extends beyond negotiations into all relationships. The person who understands psychology better controls the dynamic, sets the terms, and determines the outcomes. The most powerful application of this principle is strategic vulnerability. You occasionally share calculated pieces of personal information that serve your interests, making others feel trusted while revealing nothing that could be used against you. Become an expert in human psychology while remaining a mystery yourself. Know others better than they know themselves while keeping your own depth hidden. Number 5. Psychological positioning is everything. This principle will change how you see every social interaction. Your position in others' minds determines your power in reality. Most people focus entirely on improving themselves and assume others will naturally recognize their improvement. This is naive. Human psychology doesn't automatically detect value. It detects positioning. People don't evaluate you based on your objective worth. They evaluate you based on how you position yourself relative to them and relative to others they know. If you position yourself as someone who needs their approval, they'll treat you like someone beneath them. If you position yourself as someone whose approval they need, they'll treat you like someone above them. The same person with the same qualities can be seen as impressive or pathetic, depending entirely on how they position themselves psychologically. Think about social media influencers. Many of them aren't more talented, intelligent, or accomplished than their followers. But they've positioned themselves as authorities, and their followers accept that positioning. The positioning becomes the reality. Machiavelli grasped this completely. The vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar. People make snap judgments based on surface signals and social positioning. Once they've categorized you mentally, they interpret all your future actions through that lens. This means psychological positioning is more important than actual competence when it comes to influence and respect. How strategic positioning works in practice. Instead of trying to prove your worth to others, you act as if your worth is already established and obvious. Instead of asking for permission or approval, you inform others of your decisions and expect them to adapt. Instead of explaining why you deserve respect, you simply require respect as a baseline for interaction. Instead of competing for status with others, you operate as if you're already above such competitions. Let me give you a concrete example. Two people with identical qualifications apply for the same position. One person focuses on listing their skills and experience, hoping the interviewer will recognize their value. The other person positions themselves as someone evaluating whether this opportunity aligns with their goals. They ask questions about company culture, growth potential, and whether the role would be challenging enough for someone of their caliber. Same qualifications, completely different psychological positioning. The second person is more likely to get the offer and negotiate better terms because they've positioned themselves as a valuable resource rather than a hopeful candidate. This positioning strategy works because it triggers reciprocal psychology. When you treat yourself as valuable, others unconsciously mirror that treatment. When you position yourself as selective, others want to be selected. When you act like you have options, others compete to become your best option. The most advanced form of positioning is lifestyle architecture. You don't just position yourself strategically in individual interactions. You build a life that automatically positions you as someone others want to access. Position yourself as the selector rather than the selected. Make others compete for your approval instead of competing for theirs. Number 6. Social proof is manufactured reality. This insight will fundamentally change how you build influence. People don't think independently, they think socially. The majority of human decision-making isn't based on individual analysis. It's based on what others appear to think, value, and choose. People don't want to make independent judgments. They want to copy successful judgments that others have already made. This means that controlling what others believe other people think about you is more important than controlling what any individual person thinks about you. If you can convince people that others see you as valuable, they'll see you as valuable. If you can demonstrate that others compete for your attention, they'll compete for your attention. If you can show that others respect your opinions, they'll respect your opinions. This isn't manipulation. This is understanding how human psychology actually works, rather than how we pretend it works. Machiavelli recognized this principle. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. People can see who appears successful, popular, and influential. Few people can accurately assess who actually possesses these qualities. So the appearance of social proof becomes more powerful than the reality of individual merit. Think about any successful person you admire. How much of their influence comes from their actual abilities versus how much comes from the fact that other people already treat them as influential? Once someone achieves social proof, that proof becomes self-reinforcing. People want to associate with them because others are already associating with them. Their opinions carry weight because others already consider their opinions important. How you manufacture social proof systematically. You strategically associate yourself with people who are already respected in areas where you want influence. You document and share evidence of others seeking your advice, inviting you to events, or asking for your participation. You create situations where your expertise or opinion becomes publicly valuable to others, generating visible appreciation. You carefully curate what others see about your social connections, opportunities, and achievements. Let me give you a specific example. Instead of trying to convince people individually that you're knowledgeable about something, you create content or situations where knowledgeable people publicly validate your expertise. Maybe you ask intelligent questions in public forums that demonstrate your thinking level. Maybe you share insights that more experienced people build upon and credit. Maybe you organize events where respected people participate alongside you as equals. Each of these activities creates social proof that you belong in high-level conversations, which makes others treat you as if you belong in high-level conversations. When people see evidence that others respect you, they assume there must be good reasons for that respect, even if they don't personally understand those reasons. The most powerful application of this principle is social proof stacking. You don't rely on one source of social validation. You create multiple sources that reinforce each other and build comprehensive proof of your value. Build visible evidence that others already see you as valuable. Let social proof work for you instead of waiting for individual recognition. Number 7. Dependency creation is invisible control. This is the most elegant form of psychological dominance, making others need you without them realizing they've become dependent. Traditional approaches to influence rely on direct persuasion, logical arguments, or emotional appeals. These methods are visible, resistible, and temporary. People can argue with your logic, reject your emotions, or simply ignore your persuasion attempts. But nobody can argue with their own needs. When someone genuinely needs what you provide, they can't logic their way out of that dependency. They must either fulfill that need through you or find another source. And if you've positioned yourself correctly, you're the best or only source. The key is creating dependency that feels natural and beneficial rather than manipulative and restrictive. Think about the most influential people in your life. How many of them became influential by convincing you of something versus how many became influential by becoming necessary for something you wanted? Your most trusted advisors aren't people who argued their way into your trust. They're people who consistently provided value you couldn't easily get elsewhere. Machiavelli understood this dynamic. He who has relied least on fortune is established the strongest. People who rely on charm, arguments, or emotional manipulation to gain influence are always vulnerable to someone more charming, more logical, or more emotionally appealing. But people who make themselves genuinely necessary become almost immune to competition because replacing them would be costly and risky. How dependency creation works in practice. You identify what people in your target environment consistently need or want. You develop the ability to provide that thing better, faster, or more reliably than alternatives. You gradually become the go-to person for that specific value while maintaining the perception that providing it isn't burdensome for you. You create systems where accessing your value requires maintaining good relationships with you. Let me give you a concrete example. Instead of trying to convince your colleagues that you're valuable, you become the person everyone comes to when they need certain problems solved. Maybe you're the only one who truly understands a complex system. Maybe you're the best at handling difficult clients. Maybe you have connections that others need but can't access directly. Over time, people start thinking, I need to stay on good terms with this person because I never know when I'll need their help. This creates a web of dependency where people have practical incentives to treat you well, respect your opinions, and include you in important decisions. The most sophisticated version of the strategy is creating emotional dependency. You become the person others turn to for specific emotional needs, validation, perspective, confidence, or psychological support. This is incredibly powerful because emotional needs are harder to fulfill than practical needs, and emotional dependency is more psychologically binding than practical dependency. Make yourself necessary rather than just nice. Build influence through indispensability rather than through persuasion. Number 8. Strategic patience is psychological dominance. This final principle separates temporary influence from permanent power, understanding that true psychological dominance is built over time through patient strategic positioning. Most people want immediate results from psychological strategies. They try manipulation tactics for quick wins. They attempt power plays for fast respect. They use emotional leverage for instant compliance. This approach might work short-term, but it creates long-term resistance, resentment, and counter-strategies from others. Psychologically sophisticated people understand that lasting influence requires time, patience, and strategic thinking that operates beyond immediate gratification. They're willing to appear less powerful today in order to become more powerful tomorrow. They're willing to give ground in minor conflicts in order to win major wars. They're willing to let others feel superior in small moments while they build actual superiority in important areas. Think about the difference between someone who demands respect through aggressive behavior versus someone who builds respect through consistent demonstration of value over time. The aggressive person might get immediate compliance, but they also create enemies who are constantly looking for opportunities to undermine them. The strategically patient person builds genuine psychological authority that others don't want to challenge, because challenging them would be obviously stupid. Machiavelli captured this perfectly. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. But the deepest interpretation of this principle isn't about intimidation. It's about building the kind of psychological presence that makes others naturally cautious about crossing you because they intuitively understand you're operating on a higher level. Strategic patience means you're willing to let people underestimate you while you gather information about their weaknesses. You're willing to let others take credit for small victories while you position yourself for larger ones. You're willing to appear less threatening today while becoming more dangerous tomorrow. How strategic patience creates lasting psychological dominance. You observe people's patterns over time instead of reacting to individual incidents, giving you superior understanding of their psychology. You build alliances slowly and carefully rather than demanding immediate loyalty, creating stronger and more reliable support networks. You position yourself in situations where your influence will naturally grow, rather than trying to force immediate influence through direct confrontation. You develop genuine competencies that make you actually valuable rather than relying on perception management alone. Let me give you a comprehensive example. Instead of trying to immediately become the most respected person in your social or professional environment, you focus on becoming someone others gradually realize they can't afford to ignore. You consistently deliver value without fanfare. You solve problems others can't solve. You maintain composure when others lose control. You build connections with key people without making your strategy obvious. Over months and years, people start unconsciously deferring to your judgment, seeking your opinion, and including you in important decisions, not because you demanded these things, but because you became genuinely worth listening to. This kind of influence is almost unshakable because it's based on demonstrated value rather than psychological tricks. The most powerful aspect of strategic patience is that it creates compound psychological returns. Each successful strategic decision increases your credibility for future strategic decisions. Each demonstration of superior judgment makes people more likely to trust your judgment in new situations. Build influence that compounds over time, rather than influence that peaks immediately. Let strategic patience create psychological authority that others accept as natural and inevitable. Here's the final truth that will determine whether you remain psychologically powerless or become strategically formidable. These principles work whether you use them or not. The only question is whether you'll be on the giving end or the receiving end. Right now, today, people are using these exact psychological strategies to influence your decisions, control your emotions, and position themselves above you in social hierarchies. The only question is whether you'll remain unconscious of this dynamic or become a conscious participant. You've been conditioned to believe that learning psychological influence makes you manipulative and wrong. This conditioning comes from people who want you to remain psychologically naive while they operate with psychological sophistication. They want you to bring emotions to psychological knife fights. They want you to use fairness against people who understand power dynamics. They want you to remain predictable while they become dangerously unpredictable. Every moment you spend believing that good people don't use psychology is another moment that psychological predators are studying your weaknesses and exploiting your naivety. The choice is stark, but inevitable. Become someone who understands and applies psychological principles, or remain someone who gets psychologically controlled by those who do. You cannot opt out of psychological warfare. You can only choose whether to fight with weapons or remain defenseless. The techniques I've shared today aren't optional strategies for ambitious people. They're survival skills for anyone who refuses to live as someone else's psychological victim. Your kindness without psychological strength is just weakness that others will exploit. Your intelligence without strategic thinking is just potential that others will redirect toward their goals. Your good intentions without understanding of human psychology are just naive energy that manipulative people will harvest. But when you combine genuine character with psychological sophistication, you become psychologically untouchable. You can be generous from a position of strength. You can be kind from a position of security. You can be authentic from a position of strategic dominance. The world needs more people who understand these realities and use them to build lives of genuine influence and unshakable psychological authority. If these principles have awakened your strategic mind, if you're ready to stop being psychology's victim and start becoming its master, then demonstrate that commitment. Like this content to show you're ready to stop being naive. Share it with someone who needs to understand that niceness without psychological strength is just weakness with better marketing. Subscribe, because this psychological education is just the foundation of your transformation from someone who gets influenced to someone who influences others. Remember what you declared. I choose psychological sovereignty over naive victimhood. Now stop choosing and start implementing. The psychological game is already being played around you. The only question is whether you'll be a conscious player or an unconscious piece on someone else's board. Your psychological destiny is determined by what you do with this knowledge in the next 24 hours. Choose wisely, because while you're deciding whether to become psychologically sophisticated, sophisticated people are already deciding how to use your predictability against you.